Welcome back, everybody, to Wave Defense Comparisons, Part 2. Alright, I'm not going to lie to you. Part 1 had some issues. Some design flaws, you might say. That one was focused on finding the best crawler killers, and I didn't actually intend from the start to include pure archer. I didn't think that they would actually be competitive, and they kind of surprised me. I lacked faith, okay? But it turns out they're not that bad. But because that was a last-minute addition, I had only been comparing the cost of the non-ranged units, basically, the siege units and ballista towers and whatnot, and ignoring the arbalists and the towers in them, because they were irrelevant, but in the pure archer setup that obviously becomes relevant. So, mea culpa, there was a bunch of issues with how we were comparing the pure archer and pure arbalist setups to the others. Now in this part, we are going to be focused on the whole pie, the entire picture. We are going to be including the cost of everything, as we probably should have just done in part 1 to begin with. At the end, I'll even throw in a comparison of fire arrows versus tower damage. Put it all together, and what do you got? An answer to the eternal question, what is the best wave defense setup? Alright, so as you can see, we are on the same save file as last time. We have all the same upgrades. Melee have attack speed and reflection. Ranged have damage and fire arrow. Siege have range and stun. I've also fiddled around with the ranged setup to try and figure out what's the best cost efficiency for that. And what I have found is that you want a few crossbows up front to take out the lobbers or spitters as fast as possible so that they do not hit your frontline troops or walls, and that they help out with taking down the giants as fast as possible. But beyond that, you can just use archers. So I will usually use 5 towers of arbalists and then the rest archers, and how many archers will depend on the composition of the other units or buildings. We try to tweak it to be as minimal as possible for each setup. I should also mention that the standards have changed. In part 1, we were mostly just looking at a small part of the battle, which was kind of the heaviest flow, but I realized that sometimes the giants come in pairs, and that is the toughest part of the fight, and we were missing that in part 1 a lot of the time. So this time, we are going to make sure that we get pairs attacking in each setup and make sure that they can survive that. So first setup, the long pokey boys. They were close to handling it last time, but couldn't quite sustain because they just took too much damage. Someone said that they wanted to see them behind sentinels because that's how they're meant to be used, and fair enough. I'm demonstrating here why I didn't bother with that last time, and the reason is because it ends up the same, because the pikemen will not stay behind the sentinels even if they're on hold position, because the units get jostled around, the pikemen get inevitably pushed to the front, and then they get slaughtered. With a great deal of micro and reinforcements, you could make this work, but there's a better option. For you see, sentinels are only slightly more expensive than pikemen, 350 to 300, and sentinels do not mind at all being at the front. That's where they live. You don't get to be that size without maintaining your position at the front of the chow line. So where 10 sentinels and 9 pikemen were failing before, just 13 sentinels, a much cheaper composition, is actually able to succeed here. And backing them up, 5 towers of arbalists and 11 towers of archers seem to be just enough to keep the swole boys off of them. As you can see, this band of brothers is having no problem with one giant at a time. They are easily able to maintain, but who cares about that? Let's see them battle the dynamic duo. Do note that we are having to shuffle our sentinels back every once in a while because there are lancers piling up on the right side. That is because we are going with the bare minimum of ranged units that we can, and they're also a bit lopsided onto the left side because that gives them a little more range on the giants, which are the main issue. But here's the real test. Bouncers roll in, and the archers and arbalists do manage to take the 2 giants down pretty quickly. Not quickly enough to avoid one hit from the giant, but that's nowhere near enough to kill a sentinel, just damages the towers a bit, and we can, if necessary, repair those in combat, since our sentinels are taking all the damage otherwise. The sentinels do get forced back during this, but are able to recover quickly after. They are able to weather the hardest part of the wave and survive, and they do make it all the way through with no losses. They clear the course with 13 sentinels, 16 tier 2 towers, 15 arbalists, 33 archers, for a total of 26,000 gold invested. No losses. The sentinels can be used for map clearing, the towers can be sold gold for half the price recovered if desired. Who will challenge their dominance? Well, we gave the pikemen another shot. We certainly have to give another shot to the pure archer composition that was so sorely cheated by the calculations in part 1. And you know what that means. It's time to stuff 90 archers into towers. You'll see just how exact that number is very soon. We've also got 5 stone wall segments in front and 6 stone towers behind it, just in case we've left avenues of escape for the archers in front, because we are a kind and merciful leader, or so we tell the people. So how do they do? Well, as you will notice, for all the single giants, this is a hands-off giants museum, but the giant couples out there are able to cop a feel on some wall. Now that is what the walls are there for, don't tell the lawyers, but unlike with the Sentinels, they will not regenerate and we will not have an opportunity to repair them. So this is going to be a battle of attrition to see who runs out of hit points first. The outer wall is already breached. Let's see where we end up. Alright, so we're most of the way through the wave now, somehow have not run out of arrows, and I have taken the liberty of repairing the tier 2 tower in the top corner there because it would otherwise go down. Just repairing that one is not really a significant cost. Our front line of tier 3 towers, on the other hand, have succumbed to peer pressure and taken up vaping, and as the commercials have warned us, they are not long for this world. The question is, will they survive long enough? It's down to the wire, a nail-biter to be sure, but it looks like 90 archers, a layer of wall, and the stone towers were just what the general ordered, and this town will survive. So that brings our new and improved pure archer setup of 22 tier 2 towers filled with 66 archers, 6 tier 3 towers filled with 24 archers, and 5 stone walls to a total of 31,000 gold. Sadly, a bit of a miss over the Sentinels' 26,000, but worlds closer than I would have expected before this testing. I certainly wouldn't hold my ground against that with a bow. Respect. Also, don't try this at home without fire arrows, kids. You're gonna have a bad time. But enough of this nonsense, let's get on to the catapults! So pro tip, if you siege up one catapult at the exact moment that another sieged catapult is firing, they will be exactly off cycle in their attacks, which is what you want so that they're not firing at the same thing since they pretty much one-shot everything. So what I was thinking for this setup is catapults, as I just said, pretty much one-shot everything, and they have great range, and if you set them to target strongest, you can get them to hit the back lines and just take out large swaths, including some of the bigger guys like axemen and lancers and all that. So I figured with them taking out those guys, maybe we wouldn't need as many arbalists and archers, and we could save money that way. Unfortunately, that turns out not to be very true because how many archers and arbalists you need is really limited by the giants, not the lesser units. So we ended up needing pretty much the same as with the Sentinels, sad to say. And while 3 catapults is almost enough to maintain, I decided to replace the 3rd catapult with 2 flamers because they are a little bit cheaper and more effective at cleaning up the dregs that the other 2 catapults miss. So this was the most successful setup I found using catapults at all. Let's see how it does. The hit singles fall to Thriller Syndrome before they reach us. The Brothers Grimm are a much more severe threat and do manage to get off 2 hits before slipping on a banana peel. That is definitely the upper limit of what we could take. By the way, if you're wondering why we have 6 towers of arbalists instead of the 5 that we did with the Sentinels, it's because this happened on the first take. Yes, 3 giants at a time. It is a very rare occurrence, but it does happen. It's rare enough that I can't really include it in every clip for every setup, but needless to say, we need to be able to comfortably handle 2 at a time so that if we do have 3 at a time, we can handle that. So honestly, that archer setup, we're probably being too generous on that. If there had been a 3rd giant, we definitely would have lost at least 1 tier 3 tower there, and we're probably being a little bit too generous on this setup as well. But you'll see in a second why I'm not too particular about these 2. But just look at those beautiful eruptions! Anyway, so we have 17 tier 2 towers, 33 archers in them, plus 18 arbalists, 2 flamers, and 2 catapults, for a grand total of 30,000 gold, which just barely beats the archers and is comfortably behind the Sentinels. Sadly, once again, it is not the catapult's day. There is no justice.
And last but not least, it's the Flame Beast from the Far East. Put your hands together for Flamer!
Of course, I don't have to tell you that the Flamer is the reigning champ from Part 1. Dropping weight for today's competition, the Flamer is now 27 Arbalists lighter, compensating instead with 33 archers. Will this shakeup be enough to hold on to the belt, or will it turn out to be more risk than reward? We're about to find out, folks. As you can see, we're going for the minimum with just 3 Flamers out front, a little bit away from the towers so that any spitter shots or giant hits don't hit the towers, and backing them up we have 5 Arbalist towers and 11 archer towers. So far, they're holding fast with the lone giants unable to make that connection. But what we all want to know is what will happen when the terrific twins make their move. Speak of the devil, here come a couple of bathroom buddies right now. The arrows and bolts are laying in, and that siege stun is taking its toll. Really tying the old boys up. I'm not sure he even knows where he is right now. Can we get a ref out here? And yes, there you have it, dropped to the mat without a single answering blow. Truly a spectacle we have witnessed here tonight. Looks like a third wheel has shown up late thinking he has the answer, but I don't think he's got anything the other two didn't, and indeed, down he goes. And with that challenge overcome, there's not much more to it. You'll notice that every once in a while we do need to pull one of the Flamers back to let them regenerate their health, letting the others take the hits for them for a little bit, but this works just fine, and with 3 Flamers, it's pretty easy to cycle them out. Unlike with the archers, this is not a battle of attrition. We are not taking any permanent damage. These fantastic 3 can hold indefinitely. And that means all that's left is to tally up the Butcher's Bill. So with 15 Tier 2 towers, 30 archers, 15 arbalists, 3 flamers, the grand total is a mere 23,000 gold, coming in 3,000 below the Sentinels and 7,000 below anything else. I don't think there can be any question who our champion is. So stand up and bow to your once and future king, the Flamer! But we can't end it without giving one more shot to the classic Grand Ballista. And in particular, I had a critique of Part 1 that the ballistas should be placed farther forward, thinking that would be a more effective strategy, so we will test that this time. Now, I have started the clock when the wave spawns because all of these defenses are designed to be built after the wave spawns. That is because the pathing is fundamentally unpredictable, so starting to build your defenses before you know for sure where the wave is going to go is a recipe for disaster. The reason I am showing you the entire building process for this setup in particular is because it is the longest to build. The Tier 3 towers in particular, along with the Grand Ballistas, take a long time to get up. The reason we are using Tier 3 towers in front is because a single layer of wall is not enough, but a single layer of wall with the Tier 3 towers is just in that Goldilocks zone. I did also give a shot to putting the Grand Ballistas in front, but unsurprisingly that did not work well, as they have only slightly more hit points than the Tier 3 towers, but twice the surface area for the enemy to attack, resulting in them dying about twice as fast as a Tier 3 tower would. You could of course also go with a second layer of stone walls instead of upgrading the towers to Tier 3, but that outer wall is going to go down faster than the others would because it's further out from the defenses. It doesn't save that much money once you consider you'll have to build another Tier 2 tower to house the extra ranged units that are currently in the Tier 3 towers, and we get a few more guys at their maximum range this way. All things considered, this is as good as it gets. Yes, I did have to stop and think for a few seconds while placing the building, so that delayed them a little bit. That is one of the drawbacks of putting the ballistas this far forward, in my opinion, because it requires a little more of a complex setup. You have to think about leaving corridors open so that your archers or crossbows can get to the front towers, though in the end it doesn't matter all that much as long as you get up the initial defenses in time to deal with the initial wave. It's only going to cost you a few extra delaying walls, but you'll also notice that I have some trouble targeting the towers to get the units into them because the game is very bad at letting you select occluded buildings and units. So altogether I find this setup quite a bit more stressful and precarious than the unit setups, but I think this was an accurate demonstration of how it's usually going to go. Now, since the ballistas set to target closest are going to be hitting the foremost crawlers regardless of how far back from the front they are, the only benefit to having ballistas further forward is to try and hit more crawlers per shot by firing into the mass further back, which is why we have set the forward towers to target strongest in hopes that they will do that. Like with the other setups, we have also streamlined this significantly from Part 2. We have dropped from 7 Grand Ballistas down to 6 and shed a lot of Arbalests. Let's see how it turns out. Well, we know we got the number of archers and arbalests right because it was just enough to keep the giants off of the walls, and we know that we got the right number of ballistas because our stone towers came right down to the nail. And the verdict? With 7 Tier 2 towers, 5 Tier 3 towers, 21 archers in the Tier 2 towers, 4 archers in the Tier 3 towers, 16 arbalists in the Tier 3 towers, 5 stone walls, 6 Grand Ballista. That's a grand total of 34,000 gold, solidly securing reverse first place once again. Ladies and gentlemen, the Grand Ballista. But that doesn't properly test our buddy V's proposition. Is it better to have some Grand Ballistas up in front? Well, you know I can't resist a good test, so we've tried courtside, let's try the nosebleeds. And we will see if there is a difference. Alright, so same number of arbalists and archers, same number of walls, same everything except for the positioning, and pretty much the same result as well. Damage taken is approximately the same. There was also 1 or 2 more giant pairs on this run, so if anything, it seems a little bit better to have the unit towers at the front rather than the ballistas. The forward ballistas may deal with the crawlers a little bit more efficiently, but having the unit towers as far forward as possible deals with the giants more efficiently, and they are the real threat. So I would say as long as the ballistas are in range of the wall, good enough, which should make it a lot more flexible and fast to place the defenses. Another mystery resolved. Just one more to go. The final showdown is the fire arrow upgrade versus the tower damage upgrade, and once again, I did not find any significant difference. We had the same setup for both, 15 arbalists and 27 archers. We had to use a different run for this one because the last save file we obviously already had the fire arrow upgrade, we couldn't reverse that, and on this wave 5, for whatever reason, giant pairs were just not showing up, so that was unfortunate. There was only one of them for the tower defense upgrade, which it handled with no problem whatsoever, but we never got any to show up with the fire arrow upgrade. I think it would have struggled with that a bit, because unsurprisingly, the general difference was that the fire arrows were taking care of the riffraff better, and the tower defense upgrade was taking care of the giants faster. So given the choice between those two, I would prefer the tower damage upgrade, but you also have to consider that that doesn't help you in map clearing at all, whereas the fire arrows do. So I'd say they're pretty well balanced, just take whichever one that suits your fancy. And that's exactly what you want from the game, equally viable divergent paths. Clearly there's still a ways to go in achieving that between the other facets of the defense, but it does seem that doubling the cost of the arbalists achieved a pretty nice balance where both archers and arbalists are a significant part of a cost-efficient defense. Oh, and I also tried moving the flamer defense back from the choke point, and that did not produce any significant difference in results either. So at least with this setup, no need to stress over positioning. So looking at the scoreboard, we've got Flamers in first place with 23,000 gold, Sentinels in second at 26,000, the Catapult Flamer combo in third at 30,000, Grand Ballistas just behind in fourth at 31,000, Pikemen Sentinel was inferior to just pure Sentinel. Flame Towers, we found in part 1, didn't really do anything different than just pure Ballista, aside from being more difficult to deal with. Soldiers, while good for waves 1 and 2, were not viable at wave 5. And finally, Flame Arrow and Tower Damage upgrades are roughly a tie. Let's have a round of applause for our contestants, and a moment of silence for their fallen comrades. What a show! My advice to the devs would be set Flamers, Catapults, and Grand Ballista's cost all to 1500, make Sentinels immovable so they cannot be pushed, increase the pierce range or the DPS of Pikemen, and increase the cost effectiveness of the Flame Towers a little bit by either more damage, more range, or more attack speed. But what do you all think should be done? What composition will you choose now that you know the facts? And did I screw it all up? Leave that and more in the comments below. And stay tuned because you never know what you might find out next. Have you wondered how exactly each unit composition compares in the field clear in the map? You may just find out. Until next time, here's wishing you happy dreams.